You can go to the next slide.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you must have cut out because I didn't hear you say it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, moving on. With that in mind, going back for a second, how can these planes, how can the fighter planes get any better? Well, jet aircraft. So we have the funny Me-262, the one that everywhere Boo will slobber and get a boner over. I mean, it's a sexy looking airplane. I'm not gonna lie, it's
It is
hot,
very good
but
looking. I don't
I,
deny it is. It's like it's nice. It's symmetrical. It's sleek. Like it looks like a shark, and sharks are cool. So if you look like a shark, you're cool.
oh yeah, but the Me-262 is the perfect analogy of early jet designs. In that, now I will say, for once, a German vehicle was designed for maintenance in mind, because the reason why those engines are stuck under the wings like that, like as if they're fuel pods or bombs, is so that they can be, since uh they wore out so easily, they would they were mounted like that, so just so they could take them off and work on them and remove the engines easily. So for once, Germany figured out, hey, let's make a vehicle with easily maintained components. But aside from that, the fighting in the role, these early war fighters, say the P-59 Airacobra, Aerocomet, the Me-262 faced, was that they were almost too fast. And the reason I say that is because the P-59 never saw service, because the U.S. looked at it and said, this thing's expensive. And this is the general thumb for every jet design at this time. Um, Apart from the Sabre. The Sabre at its time was a reasonably priced aircraft for what it was, down at the bottom center. But
Yeah,
the
along with
other,
the MiG 15. Good,
right, with
great
MiG,
planes.
absolutely. The issue with late war jet fighter designs was that they were too fast, and this is for most of the planes, that they were expensive. They were expensive to produce and maintain, and to train the crews to use them and to work on the components. Yet your P-51s are doing the Lord's work. Your P-47s are slaughtering the enemy's ground forces. Your P-39s, your P-38s, your P-63s, they're doing the work, and you really simply don't need the the P-59 in service. That's why the U.S. didn't put it into service. What they said was, they looked at it and go, "This is awesome. Let's see how this let's see when this gets cost effective, and we'll work on it in the background. We'll put it on the back burner." And that's how we got to the Sabre. Same thing with the Me-262. Within combat, the Me-262 was on initial bursts, flying at bomber formations, taking out bombers, and then would fly and then would pass. That was their peak, really, in the fight, because at that point the P-51s could severely outmaneuver the Me-262s, and this is for two reasons. The reason why I said that these things were almost too fast was because, in order to turn effectively in the radius that you needed to turn to fight a P-51, with how fast you're going in one of these things, you would either pass out from blood loss, or your plane would rip itself apart because of the amount of force, the G force you're putting in. And this was the issue. G force started becoming a big issue. And simply, you could not outturn a P 51 or any prop plane for that matter, because you simply were moving too fast, and you would rip yourself and the plane apart if you tried to, if you did some, which, God help you, if you turned as fast as a prop plane, you would rip yourself apart.
If you'll allow
If you
me a
didn't,
short aside, if
how
you'll
are you alive?
if I could have the stand for a second, I would like to
Mm,
propose that it's not too fast. The fact is that most of these aircraft are simply not fast enough. Their acceleration is nowhere near that of prop planes. And the moment that you try to make a turn in this thing, you decelerate like a brake. And the engines are not powerful enough for you to regain the speed you just lost. So you get maybe one or two good passes on a bomber formation, but at that point you've lost so much speed that if you try to do it again, the P 51 is going to be on you. And there's no way to extend far enough to reaccelerate back up to your top speed and still have your fuel remaining. Because you can't turn fight P 51s. You can't do it. Uh, these things are simply cannot make the really tight turns, and they need higher speed. Once you start hitting like 200 miles an hour, the ME262 is basically a flying brake. You start
Yeah,
losing
no,
your control over the uh, all of the uh, air surfaces, your ailerons, your elevators. It's all going out the window. You need speed to be maneuverable in these aircraft, in these jets, and simply put, they're not fast enough to effectively boom and zoom.
yeah. I thinking about it for a second. Yeah, okay, Kendra, you are very much correct. There was a video that a channel I personally watched called Forgotten History. Pretty good stuff on there, by the way. And one of they did a video on the P50, P50, the ME262, and I had put a comment, not from this channel, but from my own private channel on there, talking about how it was basically the P59 and the ME262s were great leaps in technological prowess. They were a great leap forward in human technology, but they were not cost effective. And that's essentially the point. It's that these would become or lead us into the future of aircraft design.
Mm-hmm.
But everything, and I will die on this hill. Everything that is created, every era has had its foothold, has had it in the previous era. If you look at, it is no more clear if you look at the P59 at the top right. That's the bottom aircraft on the top left. Excuse me. That's the bottom image. Of course, it's the jet aircraft. It's obvious this plane has been made from the previous era, and it wouldn't be until later it would leap forward into the early war jet design or early jet designs proper in the form of the Sabre and the MiG.
Well, the we should have probably also put a picture of something like an F-80 on here because that was the F-80 never really saw service, but it was a very important leap forward because that's when you first get a cost-effective jet. The F-80s weren't all that good, but they were definitely better than stuff like the P-59.
Mm-hmm.
The ME262 is honestly one of the few wonder weapons Germany made. And I know someone's going to say, oh my gosh, German wonder weapon uh, enjoyer. Many of their wonder weapons are absolute garbage, and they should not have been designed. Ferdinand, garbage. King Tiger, waste of resources. Jagd Tiger, why are you doing this? Stop it. Um, Stuff like Bismarck, no, it's not happening. That the ME262 is genuinely a good aircraft, or at least it started out as a good aircraft. They got basically murdered by committee. Where we have a jet design, we've got good engines, we've got this thing figured out. What do you mean you want it to do ground attack? That's literally, it cannot do that job at all. Because, like, high altitude interceptor, the air is much thinner. You get the bombers are high enough where air resistance is just where the ME262 needs it. You don't have to worry about starving the engines. It's perfect. But you want it to go in air that it is going to basically have to truck through butter and fight air resistance for every little bit of speed. It's not worth it. You can't do it with an ME262, and they rarely ever did it because it's basically suicide. Um,
And also the F-80, the Shooting Star. I thought it saw service in Korea as like a like a strike
it
aircraft.
did it like when I said it barely got service. It saw service. Like we deployed them over there. We had F-80s, F-86. No, F-86 is the Saber. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Some of the other F-80 variants. Similar. Trying to remember one of the Navy version.
Honestly, I think they were using the F-80s just to get the use out of the stock they had procured.
Yeah, I mean, like we had Bearcats over there, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Like we still had prop aircraft over in Korea, but F-80s were
The Corsairs,
finally
if I'm not mistaken.
the F-80s were we have it,
Mm-hmm.
and the F-86 just fixed all the F-80s problems and made it a legitimately viable turn fighter at high speeds.
Mm-hmm.
Because the F-80, it was similar to the ME-262 where it is slightly a flying brick.
But
And
all in all, French point.
what?
Sorry, you were saying something.
Um, and the P-59s, ME-262s, a lot of these jet fighters, um, or at least the early ones, like not the F-86, but the P-59, ME-262, the
There's a British
the
one at the bottom right, a bottom left, and the bottom right is a Soviet one.
yeah, that's a
But those ones were more so test beds than or testing aircraft, if
oh
anything.
my gosh, my brain. I don't know why my brain is saying like Yak 9 and Hornet because I know those aren't right. MiG 9 MiG 9 and um I'm forgetting what the British one is called. Right now I've read I've read the report from it. I don't know why my brain's derping out. Um it's either the LA 9 or the MiG 9. It's one of those two Russian aircraft, either top center or bottom right. The
The MiG 9, I think, is the one in the top center.
these plane Russia more than anyone. I'm sorry, my brain just remembered like half of the British. Just forgive me for that. The Russians more than anyone had an awful time with early jet fighters. Um, the I forget which one, but basically it would fire its cannon, and the cannon debris would get sucked into the engine and eat the engine.
Mm.
Um, uh, Russia lost one of its really good test pilots to one of these things. The basically the engine died and it went down in a fireball. Well, it went down and then exploded into a fireball. Um,
Personally, I just survive. I'm just built different.
yeah, I just like hit a dodge roll last second iframe it.
What's it called? You see the thing is I have the dodge build from Payday 2. Wait, does that mean I can put Payday 2 in the tags now? Sweet. Anyways, I am
I'm sorry.
good for this time.
Uh, the Gloucester Pioneer. The
Hmm.
I knew it had Gloucester in it. My brain is actually horrific labyrinth of stuff that shouldn't exist.
That's a lot of people. So, but either way, I am done with this. I'm done with this slide.
I guess I got one more thing. I don't want to give the impression that Russia, all of their jets sucked, because the MiG 15 is a beautiful aircraft. It's super
Sure.
maneuverable. Every country that used it got excellent use out of it. It got used up until like even after the 70s. It went like 50s to 70s, so like 20 or 30 good years of service with the MiG 15. And it did phenomenally. It had a nice weapons loadout, like nice cannon, nice machine gun. Visibility was good. You could turn that thing on a dime. Ejection seats, air brake. It was an amazing airframe. The only problem is they just couldn't upgrade them, and well, one, they couldn't upgrade them, and two, the MiG 21 exists. And that thing has missile capabilities, which is Zaist,
It's
as the
what's
cool
it called
kids say.
it's like the MiG 19. It's like you said the MiG 15. It's like the MiG 15, the cooler MiG 15.
Well, yeah. Well, you also have the MiG 19, which is it's basically a MiG 15 with an extra engine.
Hmm. But.
The only tr- country that I like off the top of my head remember like how their performance was with them is Egypt's performance with the MiG 19, and it was not good.
Mm.
But it wasn't like an atrocious aircraft that couldn't be used.
With that said, I'm going to move on.
I'm good to move on.
Now, this is where the fighter plane gets, as of now, as of the year 2024, gets a second identity crisis. This is the introduction of missile capability to jets, and you have your Hurricane, your Phantoms, your MiG, and
Mirage, um, uh,
Mirage.
uh, Crusader, Crusader.
Huh?
My brain had another schism.
What?
A four. I think A4s, F5s, um, uh, Harriers are in here.
And at this point in the development of fighter aircraft, you would go from dogfighters to missile carriers, and there's a specific reason for this. The the okay, fighters could still do bombing missions at this point. Phantoms, in fact, were famous for doing so during the Vietnam War, but that was becoming less of a reality at this point, or just going straight in, bombing a target and leaving P-47 style. Because, well, we had one of those. It was an American-made jet that was a modernization of a jet. Well, not a modernization, or rather a modern plane to do what the P-47 did. It was nicknamed the Thud after the noise it made when it hit the ground. Because at this point you started having SAMs, you started more adequate anti-air systems, and as a result, gunfighting was, well, just fighter bombing in the traditional sense we think of just going in and just bombing a target and leaving was becoming less of a reality. It still happened a good bit, but it was on its way out the door, so to speak. Another thing is that missiles, your ability to, you don't have to be directly behind a plane to, or close range to a plane relatively to kill it anymore. You could launch missiles, just lock onto a target, launch a missile, and then kill it from a good distance away, which it eliminates your need to waste time or energy, a lot of time actually, just trying to dogfight it when you can just hit it with a missile and it's over with. Now, people, mainly the reformers, they're fun, have brought up how missiles are unreliable even to this day. And true, missiles were unreliable. In the 1950s, we didn't use them much for that reason, because obviously they were unreliable, so we didn't use them. Except for that one, the the not aimed air-to-air nuclear missile.
That one was really effective. No one asked if we could bring that back. We need to bring it back.
Yes, we do. The idea behind that one was if there's a Soviet bomber fleet.
Oh wait, they did. They just put nukes on an F-35.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hey, look at the Pentagon doing something useful in 2024.
Yeah, the thing. Funnily enough, that had a whole ground zero thing happen was because a bunch of guys volunteered to stand underneath an F-80 firing a air-to-air unguided nuclear missile. You know what's so funny about that? The F-80, I kid you not, would almost have to go into G-lock or almost pass out just to avoid the blast from launching because it was on a timed fuse.
Yeah, just dive and get out of there.
Yes, it's fire the missile. All right, what do I do after? God help you, huh? but so at this point during the Vietnam War, missiles did have some reliability issue, but not nearly to the extent of the 50s. Now, the Army had a really bad track record with missiles in comparison to the U.S. Army, in comparison to the U.S. Navy with the Phantoms. Now, what was the issue? Well, the issue was mainly due to doctrine and instruction. They had like John Boyd. It's the whole thing with John Boyd, where the Army was their instructors were trained by John Boyd, and then you'd have that go down the line, and people like him who would say things like you can only engage missiles at certain times or certain engagements, or in certain circumstances you can engage missiles to kill. Otherwise, you need to use your cannons. A lot of people, I've heard a lot of people talked about how this was more so ego boosting. So he knew exactly what students would do, so he could get the better of them always and always have the upper hand. Either way, this taught the pilots of the Army F4s the Army Phantoms to be very picky with the situations that they would use missiles in. But the Navy didn't care. They saw a target, lock on, fire. Right? Because there's no point in you trying to get into a dogfighting at this point in Vietnam, or even in this era of war, was only used in a last resort. Our flight wing does not have any more missiles. We have cannons. Let's use them. But that's not your first option. Never should be.
In the world?
What's up?
The loudest plane is flying over my house right now.
Yeah, sorry, there's a B-1 bomber coming in from Qatar. It's about to drop a 1,000-pounder on you.
The B-1 bomber's got a freaking prop on the front of it. It's
the B-1. It's the B-1 reformer plane. Anyways, at this point, there's no point in using
in defense of John Boyd. I will defend him on one account. So, in the case of the American F-4 Phantoms, they were outfitted with two primary missiles. You have AIM-9 Sidewinder and you have Sparrow missile. AIM-9 Sidewinder is guided by heat. It's a heat seeker. Sparrow is radar guided, and the Sidewinder was a pretty good missile. The Sparrow, not so much. It did not take much to notch one. At least it depends wildly. So basically, with a Sidewinder, under certain circumstances, John Boyd is correct. You kind of need to wait till you're behind someone. So if you've got someone coming to your front, you can only really use your cannons or trying to launch a Sparrow at them. And you couldn't do it. You would increase the chances of your missile working if you were to launch it a lower G. Because sometimes in certain G maneuvers, whenever they would try to launch Sparrow missiles, let's say they're in like an 8G turn, 9G turn, trying to launch a Sparrow missile, the missile would basically instantaneously lose lock and just plummet towards the Earth.
I have lost my purpose. I must commit suicide.
Yeah, and it was the American pilots had a really weird time, especially for the Army, when they were trying to figure this out because he's not wrong. Like if technically a jet is like all hot, regardless of what angle you're looking at a jet, especially these like Cold War jets. They should all have a radar signature and they should all be hot. So the missile should just go after it. But sometimes they just didn't work, or
I will say
the missile would go to other what it would see as hotter spots.
Yeah, and that could be open fires, but I will say this though, the Navy pilots understood when to engage with missiles or cannons because of they knew the circumstances. It was, as you talked about, which is true, and you are right. But the Navy understood that. The Navy understood when to engage enemy aircraft with certain weapons. The Army did kind of the same. John Boyd, but more so, John Boyd was swearing off missiles as a whole for different reasons. There was a disconnect between the effectiveness of the Army and the Navy because of Army doctrine, which was started largely
just simply
right
put,
communication.
Miscommunication between troops and high command and what recommended procedure is for the use of weapons.
Mm-hmm. But either way, this was also during a identity crisis for the operation of planes, and from there we have figured out that missiles have become the top dog in air-to-air engagement to this point, which we'll get into in a second. There's a story, you can find it on Laserpig's channel, but there was a point in where I think the Iraqi army was using, or the Iraqi Air Force was using MiGs to invade other countries, and then at one point the Iranians.
Okay. I got this. So basically, this is during the Iran-Iraq War, during the 80s, if I remember correctly, and they're flying MiGs, and the Iranians are using stolen Tomcats, pretty much. And they're launching over-the-horizon radar. Active radar missiles. I forget which missile it was. And they were smacking the MiGs without the MiGs knowing it. Like what was going on. And it basically resulted in almost a riot from the troops themselves.
And so, yeah, but missile, and okay, with that said, that's all I have for this slide.
I guess I've got some here. As far as like every nation and these like Cold War jets, I know we've talked a lot about the F4s, but the MiG 21s were good. Um, the they didn't get a particularly good rap in any war that they existed in, partially because of poor troops and Russia never used them in like an air superiority conflict around the time. Simply put, the North Vietnamese were outnumbered, outgunned. Well, not necessarily outgunned; they were outnumbered.
And not
Um,
trained.
the other service is like the 7 Days War, and you don't need to be a mega history buff to realize that went terribly. And they had MiG 21s fighting barrages, and mostly due to the Israelis having extreme amounts of battlefield initiative, at least in the air war, the like Egyptian Air Force didn't stand a chance.
It was it
Well,
was
no, no,
rough.
no. They used. I'm trying to remember. Because they had MiG 21s during the 7 Days War, right? Or was it the Yom Kippur War? I'm thinking about.
I think you may be thinking about the Yom Kippur War.
Okay, MiG 21s didn't do well there either. I, either one that they served in, they didn't do particularly well. Like Yom Kippur War, Israel's KD fell to like 6-1.
Mm.
It was still awful. Performance was equally as bad. It's just less died.
Mm.
The a lot of the only people who really, it still baffles me that a lot of these jets are still in service. Like, brother, please take these things out of service. Get the F5. Wait, I forgot the Houthi F5 is no longer operational. God rest its soul.
That was
The like
whatever left of it.
Iran is still using F4 Phantoms. There's a couple of countries in Africa that are insistent on using MiG 21s, or like MiG 20, one of the MiG 21 variants, like the MiG 28. I don't think anyone's using F100s anymore. Um, oh, I completely forgot.
And,
Oh yeah,
which is
it's like South Korea is
that is a
still
good point.
North Korea is still using MiG 15s.
Oh yeah, they are.
Jeez, guys, please upgrade. I know they just got some MiG 29s, but at least use MiG 21s. You're sending those men to their death. They
Oh
are
yeah, for
literally
sure.
useless.
But either way, that's I don't want to cut this short because history is as it does, but we are running out of time, I'd say. That was part three. We went over the early war jet designs, the ME-262, things like that. And then we went into the Cold War Korean era and the Vietnamese era jets, where you saw fighter planes go from these dog fighting machines into evolving into more of a ordnance launching platform. But with that said, it's been good. Thank you guys. Watch part four that comes out later. Have a good one. Get back to work.